Kagurabachi closing out its final part in the exact same way the series began is a stunning move by Hokuzono, to be honest with you. Not only indicating that we have come full circle on Chihiro's initial goals to become a bladesmith and surpass his father, but Chihiro is now coming to the conclusion of the seemingly innocuous question his father posed to him many years ago in Chapter 2. Hokuzono has moved me once again. He's left me grieving for a character I formed a very deep connection with, and has left me with questions, doubt, and a sense of just hopeful fulfillment. I can't believe part 1 is over, so let's talk about it.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
The chapter opens up with a minor time skip of 4 days since the finale of the Kamanabi raid here, and we're seeing the Masumi figuratively and literally going underground in a kind of way that I sort of predicted. I'm kind of like almost 3 for 3 on predictions here a little bit, to be honest with you, so I'll take it. Anyway, seeking shelter from the new regime that takes a hold of Japan, Soga, whom we see residing in the air, blade drawn appearing victorious over the Japanese people, while a radio poses the questions: will we no longer live in fear of evil? What does the future hold for Japan? The idea that not only is Chihiro and co on the run from Soga, skulking around in the shadows and plotting their next moves here, but the idea that the Japanese people now view Soga as this hero, this Superman, despite all that we know about him. It's this real double-edged sword for us, the reader, in comparison to the natives of the island of Japan in this. These very same people are going to look in the same vein upon Chihiro and co as the villains, the evildoers, and the court of public opinion is already decided at this point, especially when you consider Chihiro's actions in the playhouse some 50 chapters back. Since the series began, he's been constantly in the public eyes, fighting and causing chaos, and as far as they're concerned, in his first fight against Sojo in public, as far as they're concerned, he's just a menace. And there's the fight at the theatre, at the hotel, the Rakuzaichi arc. He has been in many instances where Chihiro is, to the unknown eyes of the public, he can be perceived as the villain of this story. And it's kind of, you know, poetic that Hokuzono displayed that kind of thing going on in the theatre as Chihiro and Hirohiko had their first meeting. And I imagine that this will always inspire Chihiro's choices into what kind of new sword he brings forth here. Now, the Masumi now sits underground waiting upon news guard and Iori. Now, I really love the idea that the Masumi sort of act as like a package deal for the Tobimuna. They're like a buy one, get one free. You get the Tobimuna, you get the Masumi with them, because it seems no matter where that blade is, they're not far behind it. Now, Chihiro enters the room and the Masumi are obviously shocked because they don't know that he was okay, as far as they haven't seen him since that fight happened on the rooftops. But more importantly, they didn't know about Samura at this point. Now, I'd be willing to bet that Iori at this point probably knew in her heart that what had become of her father here. Now, Hokuzono does something really interesting. It's happened many times within many multiple series that have had multiple parts, and he's adding a layer of complexity to the enchanted blades themselves. No longer do they just have their base powers, the true realms, and everything that follows with that, but Chihiro describes it as they have an ultimate arcana, a dark power, if you like, and that power was brought forth by Samura. It's the power that was brought forth by Cloud Gouger, and this is the power that allowed Samura to fight momentarily on par, on equal footing with Soga, if you would like. And this kind of sets up a nice, interesting dynamic between Chihiro and Samura. Obviously, there was already a lot of dynamics and parallels at play between those two anyway, but this somewhat parallels almost what they've said, because Samura was lost and Chihiro showed him the way. And then when Chihiro was lost, Samura showed him the way by using this dark power. Samura's staking his life on the future, exploiting a power that he knew Chihiro would bear witness to, a power that the Magatsumi commands on the regular. It means that if Chihiro can forge a blade like the Magatsumi, like the Shinoichi, he too can harness that power without the cost of a life being needed to fuel it potentially. Now, I'm going to say something here, and I don't want to be jumped in the comments. Obviously, I didn't make a video on Samura's death last week. I'm going to be honest with you, that chapter really caught me off guard, and it's just wowie, you know? I think at some point down the line, I'm going to make a full video about that, but I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not keen that the idea that Samura somewhere down the line might be resurrected. Samura's sacrifice, for me personally, is a pinnacle moment of his character. I think it's the apex of his character arc, in my opinion. It's him doing as he says, and he's placing it all. He's placing all of his hopes on the future. He's placing his hopes on Iori, on Chihiro, on the future. He's going all in on this. And Samura's death and possible resurrection, it just doesn't sit right with me. However, I am more than willing to let Hokuzono cook. I'm not going to cast judgment on it. I am skeptical. The information of the dark power and the possibility of Samura's revival now adds this extra fuel to Iori's narrative, which I do enjoy. I like, because reviving her father in order to have conversations that these horrific circumstances have robbed them of is something that I'm very, very much on board with seeing. But I will say concretely, despite being skeptical of this possible revival, I am open to whatever Hokuzono writes here. I am open to it because, I don't know, man, I feel like Samura sort of completed his arc for me, personally. And I think if we bring Samura back, I feel like it kind of gets rid of certain stakes within the series, personally. But the chapter also confirms something that I have long since speculated on, and that is that the blades hold within them a life. Chihiro describes this as a sort of conceptual life, and this is how Cloud Gouger was able to sort of sacrifice itself in order to wield this dark power in the Rakuzaichi arc. Now, upon hearing this, Iori's instant reaction was to try and immediately break the blade, and honestly, I'm genuinely really looking forward to seeing more of Iori's character in the series again. It's no big secret that my top chapters are like 70 to 73 within this series. Like the dynamic between Samura and Iori just hits far too close to home for me personally, and I am very, very much looking forward to seeing more of her character in the series. Her, Hakuri, and Chihiro in part 2 can now sort of really take center stage, where in the first part they almost, some parts, felt like side characters in parts of the story in comparison to their fathers and their roles within the story. At certain parts, Hakuri felt overshadowed by Kiora. In certain parts, Chihiro has been sort of stepping into the shadow or trying to step in and out of the shadow of Kunishigi all of his life. And obviously, Samura has just stole the show since he fucking got introduced in terms of his interactions within the story and how Iori has interacted within the story. So I do hope that now part 1 of the story has sort of concluded. Maybe in part 2 we slow down just a little bit, just for a few chapters, and change up the pacing, because it allows us to take a breath and allows us and the characters to sort of sit back and take all this in, take what's going on with our heroes here, especially now. Like, I think Hokuzono can really do, I think he should take his foot off the metal here, personally, because he's got us. We're all here, right? We're not going anywhere. 112 chapters now. You know, you could probably take like a 10 to 15 chapter sort of pace back, allow these characters to interact, and then fucking get us back into the action. Maybe that's just a personal take, but I enjoy sort of character-driven moments sometimes a lot more than the fight, especially when the authors, like Hokuzono here, are so good at writing those character interactions. Now, Chihiro embarks on what many of us have speculated on is the Reforging arc here, but before that, Hokuzono drops a positively massive bombshell, possibly a massive bombshell. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned that I had doubts and questions, and those doubts and questions legitimately stem from this one panel in this chapter. In one very singular panel and a few words, Chihiro's birthright, heritage, and entire existence is just littered with question marks. This panel shows us Soga thinking about what Samura told him, that Chihiro will dispel his curse. However, Soga thinks not of this curse that he's got from the war, but rather a lesson that was taught to him from the war. And we're shown a panel of a kid that I personally suspect is Chihiro wrapped in a blanket that is covered in blood, which I suspect is potentially his mother's blood. And this panel gives us a lot of questions. And rather than speculate, I want to hear your theories on the comments below, because I've already seen a lot of theories, and this one, to me, I feel like kind of confirms that Chihiro is indeed from the island, but we will see on that. But I'm theorizing personally that what we are going to learn about Chihiro in the future and about his birthright is there is a lot more going on than we have been sort of led to believe. Again, Hokuzono has obviously mentioned that Chihiro's mother is going to play a big part in the series. It's just sort of when, but I'm excited for it. Aside from this panel, I believe that the following panels is what really ties part 1 together in this beautiful bow. Now, if you've not realized it by now because you've been swept up in the action, it's absolutely fine. It happens to all of us, but part 1 has had this underlying story for Chihiro, Hakuri, and Iori. And that is just outside of getting just revenge and sort of completing their own little sub-goals here. Every single antagonist Chihiro has met has taught Chihiro something about his father that he had not previously considered. They have offered him a perspective on his father and his works and the blades that he has never considered. They talk about his father in a way that he's not been exposed to, and eventually it leads Chihiro to sort of realizing that his dad wasn't the heroic man that he'd remembered him to be, and he contemplates the points made to him. The blades are made to take lives. They shouldn't be used for the influence of one individual, but the Magatsumi is a fucking masterpiece. But that masterpiece has created the world that they are in today, and Chihiro is sort of considering all of these perspectives of everyone that he's fought with so far, put his life on the line to fight against them. Despite what their stances may be, I think it's now time for Chihiro to answer the question, to take all those perspectives into account and answer the question that his father posed to him way back when in chapter 2, when he asked what kind of katana the world needs and why it needs it. And with that, Takuro Hokuzono closes out the first part of the Kagurabachi, which, by the way, I predicted like literally 2 weeks ago. I predicted that this felt like the prologue. This felt like we're about to see it, it's over. So yeah, I'm very, very happy with the series. Genuinely, I am truly, truly proud to have been covering this since day one. And I can see now why Jump sort of pushed this quite heavily at the beginning, because it seems like the series is going to be a fairly long runtime. And obviously, Shonen Jump doesn't have very... outside of One Piece, doesn't really have many long-runner series right now. So I am genuinely excited to see where Hokuzono goes from here. But yeah, that's everything from me. Here's to many more chapters of Kagurabachi. And as always, please be sure to like and subscribe, turn on the notifications, follow me on Instagram, join the Discord, support me on Patreon, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.